Of you who choose to tune in, this is I Am Woman, the conversation. I'm normally live on Instagram, and I'm now live on Instagram as well. So, Instagram, Facebook, welcome, welcome, welcome. This is I Am Woman, the conversation, a male perspective. I am super excited to have my guest with me today. His name is Mr. Michael Adams.
Hi, Facebook. Hi, Instagram.
He's not really the person that has a login, so...
No, I don't. Sorry.
So he is sitting with me today. I have one more thing to set up on this side, you guys. I'm sorry. Everything kind of shut down on me right as we were starting. So I wanted to make sure I just went ahead and got on so people could go ahead and come on in. But I'm super excited about the conversation today because what we have to talk about is very important and plays a huge role in the Black community. So I want people to get a pen and a piece of paper, okay? Because he has a lot to say and we have to try to squeeze it into an hour, okay? A male perspective, okay? And we have to try to squeeze it into an hour. So listen, I want y'all to get your stuff together and make sure you're ready to receive what he has to say. I know we're not in church, right? We're not in church, but okay. So Instagram, my focus is to make sure that you can see him. If you can't see me, it's okay. It's just the way everything is set up. He's the one going to have all the information, all the knowledge. So hello on both worlds. So today, Mr. Adams is going to tell us a little bit about a couple different things. We're going to talk what you see on his shirt, ADOS, what it is, what it stands for. We're going to talk Wealthgaps. We're going to talk a lot of different things. So Mike, if you would, just kind of introduce people to who you are and the different areas that you are an advocate for.
Okay. Well, first, thanks to I Am Woman for inviting me on her show. Again, my name is Michael Adams. I've been in Georgia for about almost 20 years now, so I guess I might as well consider myself a Georgian.
Georgian.
Yeah, Georgian. But I'm originally from Louisiana. I did some time in the military. My final destination was here in East Point, Georgia, so I just remained in Georgia for the past 20 years. And I'm a big proponent for Black people, I would say, and getting Black people to really embrace their heritage in America. And so Ebony mentioned ADOS. First, I want to give a shout out to Yvette Cornell, Breaking Brown, Antonio Moore, Tone Talks. They both have YouTube pages that I would encourage you to follow. Breaking Brown comes on Monday and Wednesdays, about 10 p.m. And Tone Talks is about 9:30 p.m. on Friday. Okay. So both of those shows will bring a wealth of knowledge on what ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, and what we're doing to try to push this narrative to close some of the things that I Am Woman talked about, which is the racial wealth gap.
Yes. So I want to kind of provide some definitions in the beginning, because throughout the conversations, you're going to hear us talk a little bit about these things, and you need to know what these things are. So he just told you ADOS is for American Descendants of Slaves. Slavery. American Descendants of Slavery. So you might want to write that down. ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery. Tell us, what is that? What does that mean?
Well, the hashtag ADOS was the brainchild of Yvette and Antonio, and it was a way of kind of breaking us out from the people of color or Black and brown terminology that you hear a lot on TV, to kind of center ourselves and say, no, we are Black Americans. We are American descendants of slavery, the institution, not we understand that our ancestors were enslaved here in America, but we're talking about the institution of slavery that 90% of Black Americans come through. A lot of Black Americans have turned their back on that and not really understand their history and research their legacy or lineage in America, but more than likely you come through that institution of slavery, and what it robbed from you is really what we're trying to focus on.
Wow. So let me make sure I understand you correctly, because see, I'm in the millennial category along with many people. So when we talk about American Descendants of Slaves, we're talking about the fact that as Black Americans, majority of us are descendants of a slave, a person who was enslaved during
America.
slavery in America.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now the other thing we're going to talk about is wealth gaps. Is it possible to narrow it down and give a definition of what wealth gaps are?
Well, the way we're trying to contextualize wealth gaps is black and white. We do understand that there are many other races in America. However, we are concentrating on the gap between white America and black America. And presently, that wealth gap is it's not a gap, it's a chasm. To tell
Which
you the
means
truth,
it's very large.
very large.
Okay.
It is very large. Just from a numbers standpoint, the average white family has a net worth of $162,000. The average black family has a net worth of about $10,000. And this includes the family car, the family couch, and those things that really should be taken out of that. So when you pull out the family car and the family couch, the white family still has probably is about $150,000. Whereas if you pull that out of $10,000, basically the black family is right at zero.
Wow. And so the thing that a lot of people may or may not understand is where we start from plays a significant role in where we are or where we're going.
Yes.
And so when we're talking about wealth gaps, and Mr. Adams is explaining, we have to understand that in order for people to do what a lot of people call getting ahead, in order for us to get ahead, we have to look at from whence we have come. It's hard for a black family to be able to move forward if they don't have that financial foundation to be able to generate the business and create the wealth in their family that other races have had the opportunity to create that we have not. So
that's why it was so important, the ADOS hashtag or the ADOS moniker, which to tie it all the way back to slavery. So to show that the reason why the white family has $150,000 in net worth and the black family is basically at zero net worth is that it's all tied all the way back to slavery. It's tied back to what was robbed from your great-great-grandparents, that they were not allowed to amass wealth. And now America is all about wealth. You have to have wealth in order to do certain things in America. So America is not a country in the 40s and the 50s where it was growing or where they were building. You know, just about there's no more new businesses that are starting in America.
Right.
And so everything is basically built. So you have people that are living off of this generational wealth now. That your family were chattel slaves, meaning that they were considered property. They were not in the able to generate any wealth. They were the wealth creators for other people.
Right. And so right now, one of the things, you know, with everything that's going on in our community right now, there are people who are, you know, rioting, protesting, and, you know, unfortunately, there are some that are looting as well. And here in Atlanta, they have made the statement, you know, don't burn down our city. You know, that statement, don't burn down our city. How do you respond to that statement?
Well, and I think if you heard a lot of protesters, they correctly identified that they don't own anything in these neighborhoods. Now, they may live in the neighborhoods. However, you know, as recently as of 2020, a report came out that black home ownership is at the lowest level it's been since the 1960s. So that means that even in the communities where it may be black people that live, they actually do not own anything in the neighborhood, including the homes that they live in. So the businesses are owned by someone else. The homes are owned, not particularly owned by black people who live in the homes. And so the community is not owned by black people. So in essence, you're not burning down anything that you own.
Right. Talk a little bit about when black people did own things and, you know, what happened when we did have a line or a community where we owned things. I'm not sure if a lot of millennials are aware of that.
Well, here's a history lesson. So, slavery ended in 1865, and from 1865 to about, I would say, 1868, there was a period called Reconstruction, where there were actually the 40 acres and a mule. That's where that comes from, where Tecumseh Sherman actually did a field order number 15, where he signed that the newly freed slaves were to get 40 acres and a mule. Okay, and so at that point, that was a time when black people could have amassed some kind of wealth in America. We know what happened. Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Johnson came in and rolled all that back and basically gave the land back to the Southern white owners. Then you had the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, 1968. Affirmative action was another time that black people could have progressed in this country from a position of generating wealth, but we know how that has been rolled back today. So there have been periods that black people could have garnered some wealth in this country. However, because of policies that were put in place, all those things were rolled back to kind of put us back at zero.
Right.
You know.
So what do you say to the people who say, well, what about Black Wall Street?
Okay. Well, Black Wall Street, there's several instances in America where you had black people that were progressing. Black Wall Street, I think there was a town, Rosewood in Florida, but that's all resulted from domestic terrorism. So you had a government that was bent on not having black people have anything. So they allowed other white people to come in and burn and terrorize those places in America, and we don't have them today.
Right. So now we have millennials that are in this age who, you know, maybe like myself, like, Lord, you know, you knew what time and season to put me in because I couldn't have grown up back then. And now we find ourselves in the midst of these riots and protests, trying to remind people that we matter as much as any other race, any other issues and things that other people have had. We matter just as much as those things. Not that we matter more than them, but that we matter just as much as them. So what do you say to, I don't know, maybe the black male who doesn't have a clear perspective on who he is and where he stands in America?
Well, I think you make a good point in where do we go from here. Now, I know that as a millennial, I have millennial daughters. So I get the part where, you know, how we were raised as far as, you know, you can achieve in America. But America is somewhat saying that is not the America you're going to grow up in. There's a lot of myths out there. One report I would like y'all to go to is by Dr. Sandy Derritt, who's an economist from Duke, is what we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap. There's 10 myths that have been perpetrated within the black community about closing the racial wealth gap. And I would just name a few. One is greater educational attainment. So going to college, you know, home ownership. Again, I just said that home ownership is at the lowest it's been since the 1960s for black Americans. Buying and banking black, another myth that is perpetrated within the black community, that those things will help you to gain wealth. Black people saving more. There's an actual report when everything is normal. Say income for black and white is normal, home ownership. Black people actually save more than white people. So it's not an issue of black people saving more. It's an issue of black people not having enough to save. Financial literacy is another thing that has been perpetrated as these is a myths that will close the racial wealth. Entrepreneurship. Again, entrepreneurship in America today requires you to have money. So you can't say I'm going into business without some way of, tapping into some kind of money that is going to funnel or fuel that business. Emulating successful minorities is another myth. Improve soft skills and personal responsibility. If only black people would act right. If only black people would do this. They continually put the issue of you being the problem and not the system being the problem. A growing number of black celebrities. That's a great myth within the black community, is that celebrity somehow is going to save the masses. It's not going to happen. And black families disorganization. Again, those are the 10 myths of closing the racial wealth gap. Those things just won't do it. And at this point, America, the only thing, now, this is what ADOS says. You may have a different opinion, but ADOS says at this point, the only thing that will close the racial wealth gap is reparations. Reparations that is owed to black families that descend from the institution of slavery.
Now, for people who are saying, okay, what is reparations? We're not trying to, we're acting fully ignorant here. What is reparations mean?
Well, reparations is a debt owed. Basically, it is a debt owed. It is.
And who is the debt owed to?
And that's why ADOS is so important. Because the debt is owed to a certain set of black Americans. Now, from 1960 to the formation of America, this country was basically black and white. You had white people and you had black people. From 1960 to now, you've had a immigration of all different nationalities in America. You have African immigrants, you have Latinos, you have Mexicans, you have Indians, so you have a Somalis, so you have a large segment, not a large, but you have a large population. Now, all these people are considered black. I would say they are black. However, reparations is only owed to those people who have a direct tie to the institution of slavery. You can prove that you have an ancestor, one. It's not a very big thing to prove that you have one ancestor that possibly was enslaved in America.
Okay. So now when we talk about young people now and going into ancestry, how do people begin to determine if they are an ancestor of slavery?
Well, I wouldn't even say doing the ancestry. I think talking to, if you have, living relatives, great grandmothers or grandfathers that you can go and speak to and kind of talk about your lineage. Where do you come from? Explain. If you have someone that was born in 1898, trust me, you descend through the institution of slavery. You just didn't materialize. Another great thing that I found for me was going back to the graveyards. If you go to where your people are actually buried and go to those graveyards, those headstones, they have dates, they have names, so you can see that, wait, I had a grandmother that was born in 1890? Well, that kind of lets you know that, that's what I descend from. Yeah. It's also to take that back. I think what has happened in America, that slavery has been used as a means of making us feel like we're not worthy, versus using it as a means of empowerment. Because again, do you understand that the whole point of slavery was to not for you to be here? Right. There's about 42 million black people in America. Of those 42 million black people in America, 37 million is probably descend from slavery. At the end of slavery, there were 4 million. At the end of slavery, there were only 4 million black people in America. Today, there's 37 million black people. So when they freed the enslaved people, they freed them. They didn't give them any money. They didn't give them any land. They didn't give them any clothing. They didn't give them anything. So the goal was for them to really die off. To be honest, their goal was you free.
Go be free.
Go be free.
Wow.
So the goal was for them to die off. But today there stands 37 million, and I think we need to take that back as understanding that we are still here. We're still here in this country, and we're still fighting for what our ancestors fought for when they wanted to be free. They wanted land. They wanted to prosper. They wanted their own communities. Again, that's what we want today.
Right. And this is exactly, for those of you who are just tuning in, this is Michael Adams. He's an advocate for ADOS, which is American Descendants of Slavery. And we're just talking about right now what he is speaking to. We started initially going down the list of some of the myths associated with wealth gaps. And one of the things that was on the list that I think is so important, we talk so much about, making sure we support black businesses. It's a hashtag. It's, we have Small Business Saturdays, which, a lot of people use that to support black small businesses. What do you say to people who are stuck in the myths, because they believe, I had a friend today that posted, something about a map of the U.S. and where all the black banks are in the U.S. And one of the people's comments on his post was, well, man, this sounds great, but I tried this, but they don't have an app. They don't have the funds. And somebody was like, well, if we all gave them $100, they would be able to be bigger. No, they're being suppressed. They're not going to receive the same amount of funding, the same amount of support or backing as the larger banks or corporations. So what do you say to the young people, right now who are out there trying to fight for, the opportunity to have their lands, the opportunity to have something, that ownership, that power back, who are fighting for freedom right now, 400 plus years later, they're still fighting for the same freedom from then. What do you say to those people who are stuck in the myths that, we're going out here, we're going to protest, and that protesting is great, but then they're still trying to do some of the things that are on the list of myths? What do you say to those people?
So I guess one of the things you mentioned, buying and banking black. You have to understand about banking is that I think right now there were about 26 black banks, but today there may be 10. There may be 10 black banks, and of those 10 black banks, their assets does not total one company, Wells Fargo.
Wow.
One bank, it's not a white, it's an American bank. Let's not say it's a white bank. It's an American bank. So the issue with buying and banking black is that the black banks are undercapitalized. And they're undercapitalized because black people are undercapitalized. And again, a bank is a wealth creator. That's what a bank is. It's a wealth creator. You put your money in the bank and then it loans it out into the community to start businesses, to build homes. And in essence, those businesses and those homes garner equity. So the equity in the businesses in the home make the equity in the community grow as well as the bank. So capital follows capital. So if they see that community is growing, then money flows in. Money flows in. And so black banks are undercapitalized because black people are undercapitalized. That is, reparations is to repair that, to redress that, to give that wealth back that was stolen from your family. And I don't know how many people do follow politics, but I would say in my years, in the last 3 years, this is the most discussion that I've heard about reparations in my lifetime. And when I'm saying a discussion, I'm not just talking about within black circles. I'm talking about at the highest level. You've heard it on the debate stages. You've heard presidential candidates mention reparations. You've heard the Republican, even though they're against it, have to discuss reparations. So again, this is our moment to make this a push to finally get this country to address the greatest crime in history, I would say, against humanity. And that is the institution of slavery that was in America. again, we know slavery happened all over the world, and I'm not dismissing that or trying to say that it didn't matter. But again, I can only ask for reparations from the government that I am American. I can't say it's for every black person.
Right.
You know, if I was a white person and somebody came and said you just got to pay reparations to every black person, I would even say no to that.
Right.
But because I don't owe every black person, I owe black Americans.
Right. And there is a difference.
There is a difference.
You know, we talk a lot about two things I want to get to. You guys, we only get an hour, so it's so much to cover, but we only get an hour, so I'm going to cover as much as I can. If you have questions, please go ahead and put your questions in, and I'll try to get to them outside of the things we already have a list to discuss. So one of the things you brought up is politics. Mm-hmm. Right now, people are early voting, and some states have already voted. Mm-hmm. You know, talk about the importance. You know, a lot of times in the black community, all we focus on is president, mm-hmm. And vice president. Mm-hmm. Talk about the importance of the local and state elections and those positions that those people have, and because right now they play a significant role mm-hmm. that people have missed, mm-hmm. especially mm-hmm. with the election that's coming up in November.
Well, I know some people have turned their backs on voting or politics in general. However, politics is very important. It's always been important within the black community because within politics, that is a way of carving out certain budgets or certain set-asides that can go to your community for housing, for programs to support your children, for schools, for educational programs, as well as after-school programs. So the local budgets are very important. So you have to have people within those seats that understand the condition of black America. Now, we have a black agenda. Now, this is more on the federal level.
For you so he can talk.
And that black agenda kind of outlines some of the things that we want to focus on as things.
Anybody who wants to take a screenshot, I'll hold it up. This is for Instagram, if you want a screenshot. And this is for, I'm going to turn it sideways, people on Facebook, if you want to screenshot the agenda. Okay, go ahead.
So that black agenda is a new deal for black America, included but not limited to. So there's several things on there from a national level that we're focusing on. Now, of course, it may not all apply to Atlanta. That applies in California. That applies in New York. But this agenda is a agenda that has been crafted that brings in, you know, reparations and things going forward that is entitled is specifically for black Americans. If you go to www.ados101.com, at their link, you will find the ADOS Black Agenda. So this is something you have to have when you go speak to a politician. When you go speak to anyone that has any ability to, you have to have a demand. You have to say, this is what we demand. You can't just say, I want, you know, equality. I can't just go and say, well, I want everybody to be treated equal. No, you have to specifically tell them, this is what my community needs. Mm-hmm. And then you have to hold their feet to the fire.
And I think that's important what you said. You have to be able to say, this is what my community needs. You know, there are so many other communities that have taken on, I'll use the word responsibility, the responsibility of saying, this is what our community needs. This is how we want to be treated. And there have been laws put in place to respect those wishes for people who have made statements about what it is that they desire, the way they would desire for it to be done. I think it's very important for the black community to be able to come together to say, hey, this is what we deserve. Yes. Not necessarily what we need, because we need it because we deserve it. Yes. And it's so important, you know, the domino effect that ADOS, reparations, and Wealthgaps, it's like a trinity almost. It's a circle. All of those things are connected. So I really, really wanted to have an opportunity to bring this information to you guys, just because when he started talking about it, I was sitting there like, what do you, no idea, you know. And I know that it's just my personal ignorance, and I don't use that word harshly. Ignorance means lacking knowledge, and we all lack knowledge in something, and it's important to understand where you lack knowledge and find people who can share knowledge with you that you understand. Sometimes people talk in big words and it doesn't make sense. That's why at the beginning of the conversation, for those of you who were not here, I had him break down. You'll have a chance to go back and listen. What is ADOS? You know, we even talk what are reparations. We talk, you know, what are wealth gaps. We define those things so that you can clearly understand what we're talking about and what it is that we're saying. So we only have a few more minutes.
I want to say something, and you mentioned, you said what my community needs. I think, you know, just the way Black Americans have been raised, we are a loving group. We try to put our arms around everybody. We want to embrace everybody. However, that's not how a lot of other communities move. That's not how a lot of other communities see things. They are very self-interested. They are very self-centered when it comes to politics, when it comes to resources in America. So it is going to be an individual, I guess, learning from everyone individually to start thinking as a community, as Black Americans. This is what our community needs. I understand what the Latinos need. Mm-hmm. Good. That's what the Asian. Reparations is the heartbeat around this Black agenda. Again, we've just seen with the coronavirus that $3 trillion was magically created. So don't let nobody tell you that reparations is not doable. America has the money. America has the money. The question is, does America have the will to do what is right? So it's nothing to do with economies. Don't let people tell you or try to say, well, where's the money going to come from? Nobody said that when they created $3 trillion for the coronavirus. It came out of thin air. And we're saying that Black Americans are owed between $12 to $17 trillion. And we're not saying that has to be done tomorrow. That can be a multi-generational plan. It could be spread over 20 years. It could be spread over 15 years. So if you can create $3 trillion in 2 months, you definitely can create 12 to 17 trillion for a 10-year multi-generational project.
And key word that he said, multi-generational. Think about, there's a song that everybody has been singing, you know, and it says, for your family and your children and their children and their children. So when you think about opportunities where you can have something affect not just you, but your children's children or your children's children's children, Black people have not had that opportunity most often. There are some, I mean, you can find the exception if you look for the exception. Mm-hmm. But most often, it's not generationally set where people that look like me have something waiting for them when they get ready to make their next decision. What do I mean by that? Let's say your child's getting ready to go to college. You know, they say create a college fund. Have that college fund set aside. Well, how do you know I've had money this whole time I've been raising my child to save for a college fund? And even if I did, who's to say that I didn't have to take that money out to care for them somewhere along the way, to care for a family member or something along the way? Other communities have things set aside for their families. And people are like, well, that's your fault. You didn't save. No, I never had the opportunity to be able to save. I was never set up for that. You know, people who have started some of the largest businesses, they're like, well, how did you start? Oh, my daddy gave me $500K. Oh, my uncle gave me $300K. Oh, my great-granddaddy left me $1 million. My great-granddaddy ain't left me nothing because he was a slave.
Yeah. And just be aware that money, most, if not all of it's derived from the institution of slavery. If you just do the research on it, it derives from slavery. So they were able to amass wealth. Your ancestors were the wealth creators. So now reparations is saying, no, they were not paid. They were not treated properly. So now there is redress. There is repair that is to be done for what was done to them. Now, of course, we all know that they have passed on, but you are the descendants of them. No different than the Holocaust, no different than the Japanese internment, no different than Native Americans, no different than many other groups that have been paid
their reparations.
Their reparations and redress for things that were done. And you cannot tell me that the greatest crime against humanity, which is the transatlantic slave trade, that should not receive some form of redress for what was done to those people.
Right. And I think the key thing to hear, because sometimes we listen, but the key thing to hear that he said is that those other people that he has mentioned have already received reparations for those situations
and
that
continue
happen.
to receive it.
And continue, and continue. If they die, someone else in their family is continuing to receive those reparations. And I do think that it is due time for it to be not just addressed, but assessed, for people to understand the importance of what American descendants of slavery is, what wealth gaps are, and what reparations truly represents. I think sometimes it is a conversation that people have avoided having, just because they may feel like we are complaining. That's the word I'll use. People say, "Oh, you're complaining."
Or you want a handout.
You just want a handout. No. You just want a hand up. Yeah. No. I just want a hand. See, you cut off my hand.
Yes.
You cut off my hand a long time ago. I just want a hand. I don't want a hand out. I don't want a hand up. I want a hand.
I want my hand back.
I want my hand back. That's good.
I want my hand back.
I want my hand back. You have somebody on here who said ADOS know you. So they're from the ADOS in Noya.
New Orleans. All right. Hey, ADOS New Orleans.
So you guys, I really, really appreciate this time. We try to respect the time because they will cut us off. And I don't want them to cut us off. Does anybody have any questions? I don't see anything in the question bar on this side. And I don't see anything in the question bar on this side. Any questions, you guys? Because I have one last question for him that I'm going to have him wrap up with before then. So, Mike, the one question I'm asking my males all this month, because this is I Am Woman, the conversation. Okay. I want you to talk a little bit about a woman or women who have had an effect on your life in general, or had an effect on you having the mindset that you have today, and what do you do, what you're doing.
Well, I would have to say, that's my mother. Most men probably would go back either their mother or their grandmother. And let me say my mother and my grandmother. Actually, I lived with my grandmother for 3 years before I left Louisiana. And just watching them and the struggles that they went through in life. And I guess growing up, as a male, you always want to take care of your mother, or you always want to be able to do things for your mother that you know she deserves, and that maybe was not, given to her or wasn't afforded her for whatever reason. And so both of them had a profound impact on my life. I think they both shaped me. They always say my grandfather, who always would have me tag along with him, that I have his mind, but I have my grandmother's determination. So my mother and my grandmother were extremely influential in my life. They helped shape a lot of the, I guess.
Go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it. A lot of the what? I was way better.
Little quirks I might have, you know what I'm saying? But black women, I guess, we have to understand that black families are the nucleus in our communities, and we have to do everything to uplift our black women as black men, and black women as uplifting black men as well, and understanding that the situation that you may be in is not your fault. So you not only this ADOS would it help me to understand about myself, but it also helped me to not look at my fellow black women or black men in a negative light, because now I understand some of the behavior is not their fault. It is due to the fact that they're just trying to get their hand back.
We coin something like that. We might need to go copyright that. I just want my hand back. I just want my hand back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you so much for joining in tonight. We have had a great conversation. Please make sure you like, share, go back and listen. For those of you who just joined, we had a great conversation tonight with Mr. Michael Adams, advocate for ADOS. Shared a lot of information with us. You can check out the website, ados101.com. We did hold up, if you go back, we held up the black agenda for ADOS, and you can screenshot that so you can have that information to zoom in on it, but I'm sure it's on the website as well. So those of you on Instagram, thank you. You know, Cedric said fight the power. Fight the power. So, I just, those of you on Instagram, obviously you can go back and play. Those of you on Facebook, I am not normally live on Facebook because my guests are usually not sitting next to me. So for those of you that are on Facebook, I'm live every Tuesday and Thursday this month interviewing some kings. I call them our kings because we have to affirm them as who they are and uplift them in a way that reminds them of who they are. So I'm interviewing some kings this month that have great knowledge in areas that we need to know a little bit of something about. So I am woman. This is the conversation. Let's talk. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Facebook, you're off first. I have to do one at a time. All right. If you end a live video now, you're able to choose if you want to save or delete it. Okay. All right. View post. All right. Bye, Instagram. Thank you guys. In live. In